hello, strangers. To anyone out there looking for a story for that long car ride home, you've tuned in to Neon Static, where every week, one true, original scary story is yours for as long as you listen. I'm your host, Vi, and this week, I'm taking you camping. Just in your imaginations, though. All the benefit of a campfire story without having to sleep on the ground where, no matter how well you scout the area, you will inevitably find a rock up against your spine by morning. Charming. So, avoid the poison ivy and settle back with me, because this week is story 258, and here's what happened. I woke up under the stars. They glittered in the night sky, turning it into a murky blue-gray. I blinked, letting my vision clear and sharpen, making the haze resume its look of pinpricks of light punched through dark paper. I hadn't been dreaming, but my brain needed a moment to wake up, take all of this in, remember where and why I was flat on my back, staring up through giant redwoods. My mouth tasted sweet, like some kind of fruit candy. I wasn't panicked as I remembered. When you go on a class camping trip, the camping part assumes that you will be outside. I'd gotten on a bus with 20 or so members of my 5th grade class whose parents had signed the permission slip. My dad's rucksack from his days in the army stuffed with way too much for a 2-day trip. Sleeping bag, pillow, spare pillow, socks that presumed I'd be switching them 6 times a day, and the bright orange pump tent that we'd signed up to bring to share with others. I relaxed for a moment. I almost slid my eyes back shut, and then I sat up. Hang on. Where's my tent? I looked around, all at once awake, before the second thought hit. Where's everyone? Because I had gone to sleep in a tent, and that tent had been one of a cluster of many. All the kids and chaperones and teachers huddled together under canvas and nylon in a rainbow of colors. But as I looked around now, there were no colors. The woods were dark, especially the further down you went from the night sky to where the massive trees cast shadows of inky black near the ground. Meaning I was sat in the darkest dark I could imagine, completely alone. I looked down at myself. I was still bundled in my sleeping bag, rather my mom's sleeping bag. In this light, the light blue looked trash bag black. I half rolled, half pushed the bag down my body and squirmed out. While I'd had the good sense to sleep in thermals and the thick slipper socks I wore at home, I had no shoes with me. They'd be back in the tent, where I'd slipped them off before... I wheeled around, sure I'd heard something off in the distance. My heartbeat hurt, it was pounding so hard, going from sleeping to full-on panic in a matter of moments. I pulled in a breath. The air was cold, nearly stingingly so. It was full of pine and loam and dirt and the wet of the air around me. It made my nose burn. I thought I'd call out, but just as I prepared a cry, a shout, I heard something closer. A branch, cracking. The sound wadded up in my throat, making my eyes water as I swallowed it back down. I didn't know where I was, and finding camp, finding my class, was surely the best plan. But among the 2 questions I'd had upon waking up out here, a third now chimed in. How? How did I get here? Sleepwalking was out of the question. I'd never sleptwalked, not ever, and I'd been tightly wrapped in my sleeping bag like a burrito. I hadn't walked, I couldn't have. Which meant someone had to bring me here. No. Panic began to build again. More tears stung my eyes. Not bring me. Take. Behind me, another branch, then another. A crashing sound as something moved fast, though clumsily, through the bushes. I was thinking bear. No, wolves. There's more than one. I wanted to look around for a weapon. Wasn't it that you needed to make yourself big as possible? Maybe throw things to make a wild animal understand you weren't their dinner. But I couldn't see anything, and the thought of turning and facing down an apex predator armed with a soggy branch, my heartbeat was kicked into a thudding, speeding train. I turned on my socked feet and I ran in the opposite direction from which the crashing, branch-snapping sound came. The turf was thankfully not too rocky. The dirt was dark and crumbly, and patched in wet, spongy places that had to be moss. My eyes were acclimating to the dark all the time. The socks were instantly wet, and once wet, the cush fleece was losing any padding, becoming just cold and thin under my feet. I was able to recognize roots and fallen branches. Not that I could stop myself, pick my path more carefully. My mind was stupid, blabbering, just telling me in wordless shrieks that meant go, go, faster, go, it's coming, it's behind you, go! I sucked in another breath, tasting that fruit candy again, and the shrieks stopped. It was me shrieking, giving away where I was. Not that I could stop myself in this either. Nothing made sense. Not where I was or how I was there or who had done it to me, so why not completely lose my marbles and scream the whole way down? Well, for one, because scream shouting while trying to sprint is a terrible idea. A terrible, knotting stitch was ripping through my ribs. The feeling was like the bones themselves were jabbing into my lungs, halting me from getting a full, good breath. My feet had gone numb, blessedly from the cold, but from the thunks and occasional, distant jarring aches, I knew that once I stopped running and they warmed up, I'd likely have dislocated if not broken all of my toes. Branches were whipping me. I kept throwing up my arms to bat them away as I ran past. I felt welts rising up on my arms before they, too, became icy, leaden, dead weight swinging at my sides. But my heart, my throat, no ice there. It was all fire as I barreled on. I had to be losing them, just a little bit longer, just a bit. And down I went, not having noticed that I ran right off the edge of the path, down a mossy dip that blended in too well in the dim light. I threw my arms out in front of me and somehow twisted. I managed to land against braced forearms and then rolled to my back for the rest of me to land. The impact puffed air from my already deflated lungs. Wheezing, I rolled and scuttled on all fours off the path and into a bush. I turned alongside the path and laid myself flat against the wet earth, and trembling, I tried my best to now hold my breath and wait, hide. If I could just hold myself still. But I was shaking all over, and in turn the leaves around me shook and shimmied, giving me away as the footsteps came closer, closer. What could I do? I shut my eyes. Everything hurt. How much more could it hurt? I didn't know. And then I heard. Oh God, is she okay? Is she passed out again? Check her, pull her out. Not a bear. Not wolves. As I felt hands test me, pull at me to roll over, back out of the bushes and onto the cleared path, I opened my eyes in dumb shock to see two of my classmates, girls I knew from seeing for the last 5 years more than knowing in any meaningful way, Carrie and Jessica, the girls who had been assigned to share tents with me. I thought back. We'd been friendly enough. I'd had a spare pillow for Carrie, who had forgotten hers, and Jessica had even shared some of her gummy vitamins with me before we went to bed. But anything after that, gone. I just couldn't remember. Jessica's eyes were wide, and I was gratified to see her huffing to catch her breath. In a stupid way, I was glad I wasn't so slow it'd been a joke to jog after me. Carrie, shorter and now, leaned over me, hands near my face but hovering, not touching me, was breathing hard too. Worry bled through her expression along with sweat. You were running. Did it come back? I was trying to sit up. My body felt less like a put-together human and more like a Lego sculpture someone had put in a pillowcase and swung at a wall. All I could say was, what? Wait, what? Where is everyone? Jessica had her hands on top of her head, catching her breath. Back that way. She jerked her head behind her, in the direction I'd come. Did it come back? We'd gone to get a teacher, but when we heard you shout, we came back, and you were already running away. I didn't know you did track. She said this last exasperated, like I'd been hiding a secret athletic talent just to annoy her. But she, too, was saying something that tripped alarm bells, the same ones that had sent me running in the first place. How had I gotten into the woods? Drug out of my tent, sleeping bag and all. The woods were silent, completely still. This did not make me feel any better. The heat from the sprint through the woods was gone. Everything in me was running cold and sharp. I couldn't stop myself from asking, what's it? Why didn't I wake up? What happened? Carrie and Jessica looked at each other, and then back at me. We saw him. He was big, like real big. A man in a thick coat, with a big hat, like... And she paused, making a wide circle with her hands, like the gold miners wore. Carrie opened her mouth, beginning to speak, but Jessica continued, saying it had to be a man. She looked down and then said quietly that, while they'd come across me with the thing straddled over me, crouched on all fours, well then they thought bear. I felt like fainting. It had been crouched over me, its hot breath in my sleeping, stupid face. How had I slept through it? Carrie cut in. I threw a rock. If I had any shock left in me, I felt it flood through as I looked at Carrie, diminutive, one of the shorter, really sweet girls in class. You tried to hit it. She shook her head. I thought I could scare it, but then they'd seen him snap his head up, looking around, and then rise up on 2 legs and run into the trees off to the east. It ran upright, a man. That's when they turned to return to camp, to get help, a grown-up, anything. Only they hadn't gotten far before I awoke, and they'd returned to find me, only for me to lead them on a mad chase. I was shuddering now. Too many thoughts. The man who'd been on top of me. What horrors had he planned? The pain now radiating from too many places in my body that I couldn't focus on any one of them. The shock of waking up out under the sky, having no idea how I'd gotten there. The relief that Jessica and Carrie had happened to find me out here, see the man and scare him off. Why couldn't I remember how I got out here? Why didn't I wait? I inhaled, swallowing hard, tasting that odd fruit candy taste. Strawberry. I finally recognized it. Strawberry flavoring. The gummy vitamins Jessica had shared. And I just knew. My body, pained as it was, stiffened noticeably enough that my 2 classmates snapped their eyes to me, eyebrows raising. You hear something? Do you hear him? I spoke. Those weren't vitamins, were they? Not a question, but when I stated it, I saw a look pass between my 2 classmates. For Jessica, it was embarrassment. For Carrie, it was shame. You did this. This too wasn't a question. Jessica opened her mouth, eyebrows up, hands defensively rising, but Carrie cut in now. She said, it was just a joke. Supposed to be. Melatonin. I thought we were just going to drag you out to just outside the tent, but... Jessica cut in hurriedly. It wasn't just a joke. It was going to be a legend. Look, the clearing was literally right next to our campsite. We were going to move the whole tent and just have it be like a scary story, like they told the Campfire. So we had to move it far enough where no one would ever notice. So we'd move you, then go back and get the tent and stuff and lay down and be shocked the next day. You know, something cool everyone would wonder about forever. She was telling me this like she was trying to sell me on this, hard. And you weren't in on it, so that would sell it. Because Carrie and I are friends, but you're... And her voice trailed off. That strawberry taste was sickly sweet on my tongue. She stopped and then looked down at her feet. We're sorry. She looked at Carrie, who had the grace to look horrified that Jessica had said the quiet part out loud, that in spite of their act and feeling like we were friendly, they'd not seen me as a friend at all. Jessica grunted and then repeated the apology. Surprisingly, in spite of the sleep vitamins in my system and my adrenaline petering out of my body, I had just enough in me to feel a new emotion surface. Anger. And the man? Who was he? Was that part of it too? They both looked at me, shocked. Jessica spoke first. No, I swear. We came back with our bags, and for the first time, I noticed both of them indeed had their packs back on, sleeping bags haphazardly rolled and stuffed into the straps. And he was just there. It was terrifying. And then Carrie threw a freaking rock, and I thought for sure he'd see where it came from and come after us, but he just ran off. I stood there a moment longer. I'm sure the two of them thought I was considering telling on them, or puzzling what to do next. But in all honesty, I was too exhausted to do more than echo the same thoughts again and again. I straightened, and they did too, each holding their breath. They didn't ask, but they were dying to. Was I going to tell? And I wanted to. Their stupid prank had put me in the most horrifying position of my young life. If they'd been slower coming back, or if that man had had a knife, or a gun, or the inclination to just pick me up and finish what they started, carrying me away. But I couldn't muster anything further. Like my feet and arms, my brain felt like dead weight. I looked at Jessica, and then I locked eyes with Carrie. Okay, let's go back to camp. I started walking, and after a moment, heard them following behind. So I added, I won't tell. The relief behind me felt like a physical wave. I cut it short. One of you is going to have to go back and get my sleeping bag, though. The footsteps behind me faltered, but then picked up again. And all along our dark little hike, I heard them bickering amongst themselves as to who would go back out into that clearing to retrieve it. While they feared it, they didn't see the man again. I never told, and I guess they didn't either. But when my own niece returned from her trip this year, and I asked what ghouly ghost stories they'd told around the campfire, she returned with one of particular interest. It was told by a park ranger who'd visited the class to teach on poisonous plants, and aside from deadly nightshade, he'd also brought a scary story. The story of the lost Girl Scout. Apparently, it was legend that should you go walking out in the woods at night and come across a clearing, you might find a lone, sleeping Girl Scout. In the story, she's kitted out in the full regalia, every patch available, to show that she was really one with the woods. I guess that's something that he had to add for flavor. She's cold to the touch, in that weird gray area between sleep and death. But if you disturb her sleep, the woods come alive, attacking you, protecting their scout. And all you can do is run like hell, hearing her shrieks behind you, and praying to God you can outrun her. So I guess in the end, Jessica and Carrie got their story after all. And that's story 258, which I enjoy because, well, don't you always wonder, where do ghost stories and urban legends come from? Sometimes the seeds that grow them are their own little rabbit holes. Dropsy, Bunnyman Bridge. But I'm finding just as often they happen from the simple conflict between two people seeing the same thing and walking away with a very different understanding. Who knows? Maybe, somewhere out there in your past, you've played a part, a role, and become a legend in somebody else's retelling. It's a sort of legacy they don't put on brass plaques for the Historical Society. No, it's something quieter. A sort of inner circle. A little club where the membership requirements are. You just had to be there. And I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am that 299 of you have been there with me. It's 2 years in October, and I'll never know how to thank you guys enough. Suggestions welcome, of course, via the usual means, social media or email in the description. Liking and commenting and subscribing are another way to interact, but I'm just so glad you're here. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you and wish you to take care, my strangers.